The video game Western is a rare breed of game, especially when talking about games that take into account the full nature of the genre rather than just slapping a cowboy hat on the main character and calling it a day. In the mid-2000s, there was pretty much only 3 games that excelled at bringing the Western genre into the video game ecosystem, releasing consecutively year after year, starting in 2004 with Rockstar's Red Dead Revolver, moving on to 2005 with Neversoft's Gun, and finally in 2006, the game in question today,
The Call of Juarez.
Since I have covered the first 2 titles on this channel, as well as some other westerns here and there, I think it's time to take a look back at Call of Juarez and see how it holds up to the competition. Call of Juarez is a first-person shooter developed by Techland, the same minds behind Dead Island and the Dying Light games. They were making games since 1999, but it wasn't until Call of Juarez that they found some serious footing in the industry, and as a result, there were 3 follow-up titles to the pioneering western. Bound in Blood, a prequel to the first game, The Cartel, a story that's set in the modern day, and Gunslinger, a game unrelated story-wise to the others, but within the same universe and similar gameplay. But today we're here to talk about the first game in the Call of Juarez series, the one that started it all. Before we get into it, I want to let you know that if you are interested in Call of Juarez on the PC, my friends over at GOG and Techland have decided to discount the games for anyone watching this video that uses the link in the description with the code Call of Hammers on the site. You can get Call of Juarez 85% off, Bound in Blood 80% off, and Gunslinger 70% off. So if you're interested in playing them for the first time or even revisiting them today, take advantage of the deal here. Now back to the video.
No money, no honey.
In the game, there are 2 main characters with branching and interweaving storylines. You play as both in a sort of cat versus mouse narrative style. The first character is Billy Candle, an unsuccessful treasure hunter and well-known troublemaker, the classic kid that's in way over his head, and also the mouse in our metaphor. And the second character being Reverend Ray McCall, a former gunslinger turned devout man of God, who is just as crazy as any number of religious nuts in Western media, who takes his role, of course, as the cat. After 2 years of hunting for gold and riches in Juarez, Mexico, Billy returns to his hometown of Hope, Texas, to see his ma and maybe find another calling in life. He arrives to his family farm to see his mom and stepfather have been murdered, bodies in the dirt, with Call of Juarez posted on the barn door written with their blood. Preacher McCall arrives at the barn after stories of a commotion and gunshot hit the town. He rushed to the property with concern because Billy's stepfather is also McCall's brother. After arriving and seeing their bodies, he also sees Billy creeping around the corner and fleeing upon the sight of the preacher, leading McCall to believe that Billy is responsible for the murders. The game then puts you in alternating controls of Billy and the preacher, as the preacher chases down Billy to avenge his brother and stepsister, and Billy tries to find the true murderers of his parents and find out why they did it. But before we continue on with the plot, let's rewind and talk about the development of this game.
Billy. What have you done, boy? For the love of God, what have you done?
Call of Juarez was originally titled Lawman and was intended to be a fast-paced shooter with a distinct arcadey feel to it, similar to quite a few Western titles of that era. But within development, Techland decided to take a step back and make a game with a stronger focus on the plot and the storytelling, wanting to be seen as a serious player in the first-person shooter market. Similar to the developers of Darkwatch in 2005, Techland realized that the first-person shooter genre was oversaturated with sci-fi and military shooters, so they devoted themselves to not only making a Western-themed FPS game, but a serious Western game. No funny business here, partner. Fast draw duels? Got 'em. Drinking whiskey? Got 'em. Horseback riding? Got 'em. Making love to saloon girls? Got 'em. Oh shit. Oh wait, this is not what it looks like.
You know what? He just left.
But really, they put a lot of time and effort into making the game as authentic as possible. All the guns in the game are modeled after and function the same as real firearms of the time. Same as the clothing, the flora, the fauna, and the architecture. They worked with real horseback riding experts to make sure that those segments of the game were as realistic as possible. And hey, I can't think of another game off the top of my head where you can slap a horse's ass to send it off running as a distraction. This game was meant to provide a new level of emerging gameplay. As far as 2006 standards go, I think they did a fantastic job. The script for the game was tag teamed by two guys named Harris Orkin and Pavel Selinger. Selinger was also serving as the game's lead designer and artist. He came up with the basic outline of the plots as well as the characters in the game, while Orkin got into the nitty-gritty and wrote the characters' dialogue and story specifics. Not surprisingly, the game's tone is based on several iconic Western films. Specific ones named by Orkin and Selinger are The Searchers, Nevada Smith, Pale Rider, and Unforgiven. Preacher Ray, one of the most complex characters in the game, was actually an amalgamation of Clint Eastwood's character in Unforgiven, Will Money, as well as the Saint of Killers from Garth Ennis's Preacher, and the Pilgrim in his Just a Pilgrim series. And visually, he was inspired by the lead singer of the band Fields of the Nephilim, Carl McCoy. I personally see a ton of similarity with Reverend Green from the book Blood Meridian, something I also saw with Reverend Josiah Reed in the game Gun, but that's of course just the character's trope, the madman preacher in the Western tale. Orkin goes on to state that nearly every single character in the game was based on some sort of Western character in some sort of movie or TV show. The Mexican bandits, including Juarez, were inspired by Sergio Leone's Man with No Name trilogy. Manson and his company were inspired by the corrupt sheriff in Pale Rider, and even using the show Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman for another inspiration. Another thing Techland nailed for the good old time of 2006 was their physics and graphics engine, using a new version of their in-house Chrome engine. It had ragdoll effects of bodies and objects, wind effects that also interacted with fire, smoke, and liquids. The graphics section was powerful enough to have large open areas with dense vegetation, with state-of-the-art, for 2006, shader models like per pixel lighting and advanced rendering techniques. Like all this shit I know nothing about.
Wow.
A lot of this stuff are things Far Cry 2 is known for, even to this day, especially the fire and the wind physics. But to put that into perspective for Call of Juarez, Far Cry 2 came out 2 years after this game. While this game was initially made for the PC, there was an Xbox 360 version that released the next year in 2007. Techland even ported the game over themselves because they were actually really excited with the hardware, and they thought that the game would stand out on the console even more than it did on the PC, with their serious Western gameplay. They especially liked that the Xbox controller had 2 triggers on it, so when you held revolvers akimbo style in the game, you really feel like you're shooting 2 guns.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
Surprisingly, there was also a graphical improvement for the game moving to the 360's hardware. Throwing even more technical terms around like I know what any of this shit means, they remade some levels and even re-recorded most of the game's cutscenes using motion capture, changing the entire appearance of the game dramatically. This game was essentially remastered from the ground up for this port. The entire beginning of the game was rebuilt. It's kind of insane how much time and effort that they put into porting this game on the 360. After the 360 version released, the PC version was updated as well with all these features, given that DirectX 10 allows for these upgrades to work. With that being said though, with all those fancy terms thrown around and those tantalizing tales of passionate developers making the game exactly how they want it, let's get into how the game plays and see what it's all about.
I thought men of God were men of peace, Padre. For a preacher, you sure don't seem too damn peaceful.
So with the game being a first-person shooter, I don't have to explain that we're going to be shooting shit in the game. The main thing to talk about as far as gameplay goes is the fact that you switch characters throughout the game, from Billy to Ray, and with each character comes some variation in how the game plays. It's not an insane switch up with each man, controlling them is about the same, the HUD elements all look the same, they can both wield the same weapons except a few unique items, they both heal using whiskey bottles, they can both ride horses, throw dynamite, and they can scrap hand to hand. When playing as Billy though, the focus on the level design is more stealth based. He is weaker than Ray, but on the flip side he's much quicker and more agile, being able to jump higher, gripping on ledges to pull himself up, and he runs faster as well. With that, Billy can also use 2 unique weapons that Ray cannot, a whip and a bow. Using the bow allows for silent kills to fit within this stealth gameplay, and aiming with the bow also causes a bullet time effect, or arrow time effect, I guess, and that slows time briefly to allow for well-placed shots. The whip, on the other hand, is more of a tool than a weapon. It's mainly used to knock things over in the way, or smack a spider or a rattlesnake in the face, or lassoing tree branches to swing across gaps and ledges. And it's for that reason that I hate it, because the platforming in Billy's section of the game is absolutely ass. The amount of time that I died because of janky platforming is an amount too high, and I really wish it was not in this game. Playing as Ray makes the game more of a typical shoot 'em up game. Ray is stronger and he moves slower than Billy, but he takes a lot more shots before going down due to wearing some body armor. But with the trade-off being that he can't climb as high or run as fast. And while Ray cannot use a bow or a whip, he can use a Bible. He can read a random Bible passage that apparently has the possibility to have enemies run away, freeze, or drop their weapons. I tried it a few times and I never got it to happen, but that's a neat mechanic to have regardless. Other than reading the good book, Ray can also fan his revolver like a true gunslinger and enter a feature called concentration mode, where you can draw 2 revolvers from your hip, getting a reticle for each and moving them towards your enemies by controlling the screen around the reticle rather than the reticles themselves. It plays a lot like Deadeye in the Red Dead Redemption games. Ray also gets into duels throughout his levels where the same mechanic occurs, only it's on a countdown timer now and it's not really fluid or fun to use. The game alternates who you play as level to level, but majority of the time Billy goes through an area first using his unique ways of traveling by stealth and platforming, only to have Ray hot on his trail finding a new way to the same point, usually by brute force and a lot of murder, sometimes even revealing how hot on the trail he is by the characters seeing each other in passing at certain points. The level design of each area is relatively open, although each character can only use a certain portion of the level given the different playstyles of each. Take this level early on where Billy is escaping from some bandits. He tries to cross the bridge into the mine, but it breaks, and he rides the river downstream until finding a path that leads up and over to the mine to get onto the train tracks. But when Ray arrives, he simply uses some heavy boxes to stack and climb into another entrance to the mine, going through the tunnels, murdering everything in his path to make it to the same spots as Billy. The thing that I didn't like about the levels was its ambiguity in design. Listen, I game a good bit, I dabble in the joysticks, I can typically read where the game needs me to go if it's a linear game. But in this game, there are several parts where I was just straight up lost, or thought the game wanted me to go in a different direction. Take the level we just talked about for example. When the bridge broke and you're thrown into the river, I thought the game wanted me to keep going down the river and dodge all these rocks until you get to some sort of stopping point. So for like 6 tries, I kept dodging rocks, only to get this same rock that is impossible to dodge, and even if you do dodge it, you just die anyway. And that's only because the game just wanted you to get off on this shore just to the left, almost immediately after getting in the water. I mean, it makes sense, you were trying to cross to the other side, but come on, could you not have any sort of traditional level design element to let me know that is where you want me to go? I'm not big on game design elements, that's not my realm, I just play the games, but this game needed some upgrades for sure. I needed ledges that I'm supposed to climb marked for me, pretty please. There are some truly iconic levels, like the field where Billy hunts for rabbits. It's incredibly large and flourishing with plants and wildlife. It's super impressive, especially given the game's time period. And the area of climbing Eagle Mountain was fantastic as well. It's a bitch gameplay wise because it's just non-stop platforming, but the views and the design of it are all fantastic. I did really appreciate the stealth missions with Billy as they are really well made and even offer some interesting mechanics, like lightning can reveal you from the shadows for a moment. But the main thing that I like is that if you fail at the stealth, like I often do in games, you're able to fight your way out of the area by running to the next area or just killing all the bandits in your way. Shooting guys in the face with a bow from the shadows never really gets old though, and sometimes you barely miss and you take their hat off with the arrow, which is honestly just as impressive to see. The first person cinematics in the game also look really good and keep you invested in the story of the game. There are no breakaway cutscenes, everything is within the perspective of the character that you're playing, and it looks really good, especially considering the time that this game was released. Some other aspects of gameplay that I really liked were the ragdoll physics. Oh boy, how I love me some body flipping after getting blasted with a shotgun. So satisfying and easily made the shotgun my favorite weapon in the game. Billy or Ray, I'm using the shotty. And speaking of the weapons, they also have a durability element to them. Shoot them too much and it'll blow up in your hand. It's not obnoxious in a way, and I actually kind of liked it. You knew how long a weapon was going to last you depending on what it says when you picked it up. If you're picking up a weapon labeled as a rusty 6-shooter, then that thing's going to blow up in your palm before the level is over. So it made me keep my eyes out for new weapons to grab and use. Healing is plentiful throughout the game. It never really was an issue. Enemies drop whiskey bottles and each area of a gunfight usually has a few regardless. And one bottle heals a large amount of health anyway. Apparently in the 360 version, they just made health regenerate over time rather than making you pick up whiskey bottles, even though the bottles are still in the game, just tossed around everywhere. But I bet the gameplay didn't change all that much given the new health regeneration, because the pickups never really were a limited resource in the game. Health was never really a problem. There were obviously a lot of good mechanics in the game. The gunplay was decent, the level designs were beautiful and relatively open, and the ragdoll physics and the stealth sections were a lot of fun. However, the gameplay had a lot of things that I did not like the dueling mechanic was janky, and I hated that it was scripted into the game. Dead Revolver did it better, and that game came out 2 years earlier. Same with the fistfights, scripted in moments that felt terrible. They should have been cut entirely. The levels were a little too ambiguous in my opinion. I never quite knew where I was supposed to go, and the game just kind of kills you if you go the wrong way. It's not like you can backtrack and explore to find the right path. It's get it right or die, I guess. But the most fantastic part of this game is the swap between characters. The game knows when to make you feel like the hunter and like the hunted, and each role is done nearly to perfection, and no time is really overspent with each character. Just when you start to feel complacent with Ray's body armor and menacing presence, you're given Billy again to lasso a whip around a tree and hide in a tent from bandits. It's a great setup, and I think that it's the main gimmick that this game has going for it. And overall, this game was good to play. But after all, this is a serious Western game, so let's get into the storytelling portion and see if it makes the struggles of gameplay worth it. There will be spoilers ahead for the entire story of Call of Juarez, and if you care about that sort of thing, feel free to skip ahead. The game takes place in 1884. You're introduced to Billy. Billy never knew who his father was, so therefore his last name is unknown. However, due to his mother giving him a medallion at a young age with a candlestick on it, the kids took to calling him Billy Candle, which he took as a win over racial slurs since his mother was from Mexico and he grew up in a predominantly white town called Hope, Texas. That's right over the Mexican-US border. Billy is returning home after 2 years of being out on the road. He left his town of Hope because his stepfather Thomas would beat him silly every day for no reason, but also to prove to himself and everyone else that he was meant for greatness. He left to pursue the legendary gold of Juarez, the mysterious fortune that is the common Western trope of lost gold from a time long, long ago. The gold was rumored to be ransom money for Moctezuma, who was held hostage by conquistadors, but the city fell and the gold was lost forever, and it's said to now have a curse over it, causing all those who seek it to go insane, with those that have lost their minds labeled as having caught the Call of Juarez.
That's the title of your film.
So anyway, Billy is heading home after his unsuccessful trip, broke and hungry, but excited to see his mom and not really anyone else in town. In fact, he specifically tries to avoid 4 different people in particular, including his abusive stepfather Thomas, the sheriff Tim Powell, the saloon owner Clyde Forrester, and his uncle, Reverend Ray McCall. Of course, he runs into all of them nearly immediately. He goes through the town stealing a gun off some poor farmer and then promptly losing said gun to the sheriff. Then the first thing on his mind is retrieving yet another gun. He gets the idea to take the derringer off of one of the saloon girls, Susie, resulting in him getting caught by the saloon owner, Clyde, while receiving some of the goods for free, and then fleeing out of the window, followed by nearly every man with a gun in town because Clyde decides to offer a half hour with Susie if they get their hands on Billy.
A half hour with Susie for anybody who can get his hands on that little greaser.
So Billy then flees, of course, to continue on his way to his parents' farm to see his mom, stealing some bullets from the local madman on the way. However, when he arrives at his parents' house, he hears his mom scream before running up the hill, thinking that Thomas was being abusive again. Here, the game cuts to Reverend Ray. He's in the middle of a sermon, scolding the locals for their sin, especially that snake Clyde, before someone busts into the church, telling the Reverend that they heard shots at his brother's farm, with others immediately claiming to have seen Billy in town and blaming him for the commotion. The Reverend immediately runs to the farm to find his brother and stepsister slain with Call of Juarez.
That's the name of the game.
written in blood on the barn door, before he sees Billy creeping out from behind the door, cementing him as the culprit in the Reverend's eyes. He chases Billy, but it's no use. He's much faster than the Reverend, and he eventually cuts a bridge down in order to get away. The Reverend returns to his brother's homestead to find looters on their corpses already, and he dishes out the hands of God to all those scallywags. From here you realize how crazy and blinded by delusion that the preacher actually is.
Why have you forsaken me? How could you let this happen? Help me, Lord, please. Tell me, what do you want from me?
He heads back to the church to grab what he calls his equalizers to hunt down Billy at the instruction of God. The sheriff tries to stop him from being a vigilante, but the townspeople, already worked up, shoot the sheriff dead, causing Ray to kill every man in town with a gun in their hands as the only way to bring peace back to Hope, Texas, ending with burning down the saloon and killing Clyde in cold blood. From here, Billy is on the run, not only from his crazy uncle, but from the murderous bandits that he encounters along the way, but also to try to find the true killers and their motives. He ends up stowing away on a train to San Jose, the hometown of his girlfriend that he met on his travels. However, the train gets overrun by bandits attempting to rob it, and Billy flees on foot on the way to Molly's farm. He steals a horse from a local farm before riding out to his main goal, encountering renegade Apaches all along the trail. He finally arrives to Molly's house. He sneaks inside of the house, avoiding her trigger-happy father and brother, but eventually has a fist fight in the hallway outside of her room before she opens the door and calms the boys down. He tells Molly his parents have been murdered, and he is on the run because they think he did it. But the conversation is shut short when her dad shows up and kicks him out, only letting him live because Molly begs him to do so. The Reverend, hot on his trail, shows up promptly with some Texas Rangers that he met on the way. They too know Billy Candle and are on his trail as well, with what they say is a warrant for his arrest. They tell Ray that Billy is on the farm up ahead with a group of rustlers led by a man named Ferguson, Molly's dad. So with a common cause in mind, Ray groups with the Rangers to ambush the Ferguson farm. A shootout ensues between the Rangers and the Ferguson farm, while Ray makes his way through the place in search of Billy, who he finds on the run out the back through a cornfield. He corners Billy on a cliff edge and shoots him down, letting him fall into the river below. Before hearing the screams back at the Ferguson farm, he heads back to tell the news of Billy's demise and to find out why he hears screaming. He soon finds out that the Rangers were actually just bandits in disguise, and they decide to kill the Reverend now that he's just in their way. But that doesn't go so well for them as the Reverend is cracked at Fortnite. After killing the bandits, the Reverend learns that Ferguson is no rustler, he's an honest rancher, and the bandits kidnapped Molly before fleeing, making the Reverend second guess his actions, almost like he isn't incredibly out of his mind. He chases down the bandits, but it's too late. They escaped on a raft down the river with Molly in tow.
Oh God, what did I do? Righteous men are dead because of my blindness and arrogance. I killed Billy in your name too. Was I wrong, Lord? Was he telling me the truth? Was he innocent as well?
Meanwhile, Billy wakes up downriver catered to by a man named Calmwater. Calmwater seems to know a lot about Billy and believes fate led Billy to him. He asks Billy to hunt down 3 rabbits with a bow. Billy thinks that this is payment for having saved his life, but Calmwater simply wants Billy to stay with him for a little bit longer. After returning with the 3 rabbits, he finds that Calmwater's tent has caught fire and he rushes to toss buckets of water on it to put it out. After this, Calmwater sees his bravery and he challenges Billy to climb Eagle Mountain unarmed in order to retrieve an eagle's feather from the nest on the top without harming the eagle to prove his strength and courage. Billy completes his challenge, but when he gets back to Calmwater's camp, he finds him dead, murdered by Manson and his boys before knocking out Billy.
Hello, boy.
Meanwhile, Reverend Ray has been chasing down the bandits that captured Molly. It ends up in a huge chase sequence with Molly in a stagecoach and Ray on horseback. The stagecoach doubles as a long journey to Mexico, something seen often in westerns. Hell, even Red Dead Redemption did it. But in Call of Juarez's regard, it's obnoxious and tedious, where it could have been more thematic and influential, where you could appreciate the gradual change in landscape and environment from forest to desert, instead of dodging dynamite on a horseback. It ends at a ranch with a man on a Gatling gun and a duel with one of Manson's men, who says that he knows the Reverend. He's heard stories of a gunslinger with knight's armor that's killed a bunch of men, giving a little more perspective into the Reverend's filthy past of being a murderous heathen before he found God. Before the man dies, he utters that they've taken Molly to Juarez, and he also says the man who killed the Reverend's brother is Juarez. Thinking that he's just repeating the same name of the place, he sets out to find the girl and avenge his misguided wrongdoings.
So, all the events have come full circle. Is that what you wanted, Lord? Very well. To Juarez.
Billy wakes up tied up in an Alcazar by a man named Juarez, who tells him that he is Billy's father. He tells Billy that his mother ran off with another man when she was still pregnant with him, and he's been searching for him ever since. Juarez also admits to killing Billy's mother and stepfather, but only because his stepfather started shooting first, and his mother simply got caught in the crossfire. He asks Billy for his medallion, as it's the key to finding the gold of Juarez, but Billy informs him that he lost the medallion in the river and he no longer has it. Juarez immediately flips the script and starts beating Billy, telling him that he gave him life and he can take it away. Clearly, he's not after Billy after any sort of fatherly love. He beats him non-stop until Billy eventually loses consciousness. Thinking that Billy is lying and hiding the medallion from him, Juarez brings in the captured Molly and threatens her life unless Billy can get the medallion back from wherever it is by sundown. So Billy heads out into the desert of Juarez, Mexico to look for either the medallion or the gold. He runs into a child at a graveyard that asks for his help burying his father. He offers Billy 100 pesos if he can help him, so he does, and in return, instead of money, the kid gives him a key to an abandoned church that he just has for whatever reason. He heads to the church and he finds 3 gravestones, something that he remembers from a passage his mother used to tell him. He uses the riddle to look through the correct gravestone and find a secret entrance under a large rock. However, in order to move the rock, he has to roll a boulder down a huge hill behind it to knock it out of the way, opening a hole in the ground that he must climb down if he is brave enough. He enters this cavernous area with aggressive spiders that will attack and swarm him. Eventually, this cavern turns into an entrance of an ancient temple, where Billy has to Squid Games his way across some sketchy bridge and some other traps before entering a large wooden door with nothing other than the lost gold of Juarez sitting in a nice pile right behind it. He is stun-locked by the treasure before being shoved to the ground by Juarez, who has been secretly following him this whole time. He confronts Billy about lying about knowing where the gold is, telling him that he'll kill him for betrayal just like he killed his mother. But before the killing happens, Billy skedaddles on out of there, up some crazy puzzle wall and mine shaft before eventually running into none other than Reverend Ray. Ray tells Billy that he misjudged him and that he's there to save not only him, but Molly. He tells Billy to go and hide while he deals with Juarez, who he soon finds out is a man and not just the name of the location, and he is the one responsible for his brother's death. He gets into a shootout with him in the gold room, and before he can kill him, Juarez runs off telling him that he will torture Molly if the gold is not brought to him by noon. During the chapter's transition, the preacher remembers his younger brother, not Thomas, but another brother named William. He talks about how he fell in love with a girl named Marissa in Juarez, but Marissa did not love him back, but instead he loved Thomas. He tracked them to these very caverns, where they also stumbled upon the gold. Struck with greed, Reverend Ray was going to kill Thomas and take the girl and the gold, but his brother William stepped in the middle, reaching into his coat for something, so Ray shot him dead. But really, all he was reaching for was a Bible, and from that moment on, Ray devoted his life to the Lord, and they all left the gold there, knowing that it was cursed, and that kind of explains how he knew where to go to rescue Billy. Ray rides up to Juarez's castle with Billy in tow, with a cart covered in burlap. Did he bring the gold to Juarez like he said? No, he brought all the smoke. He lets a Gatling gun rip through all of his men before hopping off and finishing off the killing a little more personally, storming the castle to save Molly. In the basement, he runs into Manson, the man who pulled the trigger and actually killed his brother and Marissa, and he fights him to the death in a dumbass boss fight that involves a lot of running back and forth between 2 rooms. After killing Manson, he takes his keys to the cell and he finds Molly tied up there. Shortly after, the roof opens up and dynamite starts getting thrown down, making him shoot them out of the sky so Molly doesn't get, well, exploded. However, a fire does start in the pit from all the dynamite and the straw on the ground. Meanwhile, even with no guns, Billy runs into the fort to help his uncle. He's tired of running away, and he decides to be brave and to save Molly. The kid who he helped earlier by burying his father gives him a bow and arrow, telling him to kill them all because they are the ones that killed his father in the first place. Billy runs up in the place, he kills some fools, he knocks over the water tower onto the fire that's in the pit, he releases Ray and Molly from the pit, and as he opens the door, Juarez comes in and shoots Ray. He tells Billy how he treated his mother like a whore, making all his men use her for whatever they wanted, and that once he kills him, he would do the same to Molly. However, his gun jams as he pulls the trigger, so he throws it down and he fights Billy hand to hand. Billy knocks him out and then he goes to hug Molly, thinking that for some reason Juarez is dead or something from a few punches. When his back is turned, however, Juarez goes to kill Billy with a dagger, but Reverend Ray shoots one last shot at his head to put him down for good, saving Billy and Molly to avenge himself in his eyes before finally passing away. The ending of the game circles around Billy and Molly standing over Ray McCall's grave, with Billy monologuing about how he's done running and he's no longer a nobody. The story of the game was good. It's a deep plot with a lot of characters and a lot going on, and I think that that's a selling point for the game. The main characters are very multi-dimensional, never fully falling within one side of the spectrum. Between the righteous fury of Reverend Ray and the story of finding courage of Billy Candle, both characters change quite a bit over the course of the game, and while that's typical for movies and novels, it's something pretty unique in video games from 2006, especially games considered shoot-em-ups with a western theme. But overall, I think that the writing in this game was fantastic. I think all the twists and the turns in the game were actually well done. I did not expect Ray to be anything more than a man blinded by faith, but in his heart, he honestly felt that he was doing what was right. Even in his first chapter, he saves the dead sheriff's wife from vagrants trying to attack her. He acts on a righteous path, even if he's very black and white about it, where the punishment of death isn't always the right answer, but it's still the one that he brings to the table. When he found out that he was played at the Ferguson farm, though, he immediately sought forgiveness. He immediately chased down Molly to save her, and on finding Billy still alive, he repents all the wrong that he did to him, and he sacrifices himself to save him. He's a good guy in a way. He was just misguided in his finding Billy at fault for his brother's death. The whole story with the gold thing sort of fell flat to me though. So it's like a known secret that the gold is real. It's not entirely a legend. I mean, there's a modern day mine shaft built right up into the cavern where the gold is. So in my mind, the curse of the gold is scary enough to stop people from taking it. I mean, Ray, Thomas, and Billy's mother all knew where the gold was for sure. I can understand why Ray and Melissa didn't go after it after all those years, but Thomas was a drunk, abusive piece of shit. Why didn't he ever go after the gold? And also, why would Billy's mother essentially tell Billy how to get to the gold, even from him being a baby? And even give him a medallion that solved the riddle at the abandoned church if she knew how the gold made people evil? Seems kind of misguided to give your kid all the tools to go reach it himself. But these are minor things. They can all be explained by any number of reasons, and maybe we'll get to some of that with the follow-up games. Speaking of which, let's talk about how this game panned out on the market and where the series ended up. Call of Juarez received generally mixed reviews on both the PC and the 360. Many people praised the soul that the game had with its deep plot lines and fleshed out characters, but there were obvious problems with a lot of the gameplay, such as Billy's platforming sections. Regardless, the game didn't really sell that well in North America, selling only 137,000 copies on both PC and Xbox. The sales were better in Europe, but no numbers are out there floating around. But it was enough for Techland to make a franchise out of the game and release 3 more titles, as well as establishing their name in the gaming world. Call of Juarez Bound in Blood came out in 2009 and functions as a prequel to the first game. It follows Ray McCall and his brother Thomas and how they went from being soldiers in the Confederate States Army to dangerous outlaws. The next game, The Cartel, was released in 2011 and takes place in modern day Los Angeles and Mexico. It follows federal agents battling the Mexican drug cartel, one of the playable characters being Ben McCall, the great-great-grandson of Billy Candle and Molly. And while it sounds cool on paper, most of the fans of the series absolutely hated it. In 2013, the final game of the series was released, titled Gunslinger. It returns the game to the late 1800s in the Wild West, and it tells a story of a bounty hunter named Greaves, and his encounters with many real-life legends of the West, like Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Butch Cassidy, and more. It is entirely unrelated to the first 3 games from a narrative perspective, though. The general consensus of the games is that Bound in Blood and Gunslinger are great, Call of Juarez is okay, and The Cartel is ass. But I'm making my way through each game to make my own opinion as of right now, and I can confirm Call of Juarez is okay. But as of right now, the series sits steady with these 4 titles. Maybe Techland will make another entry in the series. In 2018, Techland updated its Facebook page with a banner of Greaves from Gunslinger with the tagline saying "Legends never die," but there has been no news ever since. But it seems they may like dealing with zombie games a little better at the moment, so I guess we'll soon see. But that's okay. way, I need time to make these videos on the next 3 games anyway. Overall, this game was very mid. The story was great and the alternating gameplay was really cool between Ray and Billy, but looking back at this game 16 years later, it really shows this game's age and it's hard to really appreciate all that it brought to the table back in the day. That was truly some iconic shit. It's available on GOG right now. Again, use my link in the description if you're interested. I do recommend it if you're a fan of westerns because it is a good western tale. With that being said, I'd like to take some time to thank my patrons: Spartacus Schwinn,
What kind of a stupid name is that, Fogel?
Kid Kingpin, Ejected USB, Doug Smith, Anonymous Starkweather, Sofa Palace Productions, Crash Bandicoot 25, Zachary Parkerson, Potty, Yay Man, Ben Stevens, and Not Much. And thank you to my YouTube member, THC Grey Wolf. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope to see you next time. Peace.